Hello, hello, and welcome to this week's Substack Live. I'm just setting aside my BMO notepad here. I'm getting ready to talk all about this. It's went from like a blizzard outside to a bright sunny day, so I feel like I'm got all this light behind me. But it's good to see you guys. Definitely drop into the chat. Let me know how you're doing. Let me know if you have any questions. But today's topic is how you expect love to feel may not be what you think. And it's going to be all about where we learn love. It's going to be a little bit building on some of the things that we've talked about over the last 2 or 3 weeks. And if you want those recordings, they're all there on my Substack. But for now, we're just going to do this 10 or 15-minute lunch and learn. And I love being here with you guys. So thank you for joining me. So there's something we say all the time without really unpacking it. We just write it off like a lot of belief systems as being normal, and people just say that and people just do that and whatever, right? That happens all of the time. And it's the things like when you're in a romantic relationship, when you find yourself being like, oh my gosh, I married my father, or I married my mother, or you're just like my mom, or of course of course you're going to do that. You know what I mean? Like when you just have those passe things that you say and then you think nothing of it, especially if you say it a lot, that is just your words flying out of your mouth trying to show you something. And we've been talking a lot about where we learn things lately and these patterns and how to identify patterns. And I think the number one thing that I notice with people who are in their healing era is that when they're just beginning, whether you're healing your body or healing your soul, whether you're in this healing journey that comes from within or one that's, enters from the outside in, however you start that journey, a lot of people start in this place where they don't even think or realize what is changeable. They normalize the things that can actually be changed, and they somehow disconnect these changeable things from part of their journey, part of what it is that they have this possibility over. So if you find yourself in this place where you're constantly trying to control other things and it's masked control, if you're like me where you are actually not a very controlling person whatsoever, but you can mask it in these really creative ways of expectation or tasking and need to do's and all of these other elements of control, or like really stringent routines is another element of control. You can, if you have a sense of out of controlness, you might be not very controlling of everyone else in your life, but you may be someone that's like step counter, calorie counter, like counting, 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 counting. These are those masked elements of control. But we'll talk a little bit about where that comes from and what it is you're actually trying to do. So I don't want to give it all away too quickly. But we say these things casually, and sometimes we're joking about it. Sometimes we say it in a really cutting way, and sometimes we're really mean about it, right? Maybe it's very known that we do not like someone and we just compared you to that person. Oh my goodness, that has happened to me. And I've been like, how dare you? You know what I mean? So, of course, we also do it to other people. But underneath that phrase is something that is deeply, deeply real. And it is one of those things that most people don't even think about changing. It's so normalized that they don't see it as a problem because the way that problems are defined is totally different. Like problems have to be big and dramatic and all these kinds of things. But problem just means problem statement. I mean, it's just something that's changeable, something that's solvable, something that can be revealed. You know, maybe we all just have a little bit of childhood trauma from math class and having problem statements and solutions, the story problems. Maybe none of us want to go there because of this. But I have essentially like one of the reasons that I love the BMO practice is, and the way that I created it for myself originally, is that it is both deeply emotional, like so much more emotional than your average person will allow themselves to be, but it is deeply logical as well. And so going back to that, like, math problem trauma, like, that is part of why it works, because it works for when you need to be logical and when you need to be emotional. It works whether you're a logical person or an emotional person. I have seen it work for so many different types of people. And me, I'm like straight down the middle when it comes to the right and left brain. I'm like 50-51. You know what I mean? So it all depends on where my activation is as to what side of it is really going to speak to me. So, to get back to talking about love instead of math, because I don't know, I'm on a math kick right now, but, to get back to our conversation about love, we do not fall in love with what is healthy all of the time, but what we want from love is often healthy. It's often what we not what we perceive as healthy, because perception has so much to do with learned behavior and repetition. And but it is something that on the surface, if you were to ask somebody, "What do you want from your relationship? What do you want from love? What do you want from this connection?" Of course, they want it to be healthy. So we fall in love so often with what is familiar. And the hard part of falling in love with what's unfamiliar, right? Is it's not as black and white as, like, go for someone different, go for the opposite of everybody that you've ever dated. It's not as obvious as that, because there's so much discomfort in the unknown, the unfamiliar. And the reason that we repeat our patterns, the reason that, our video from one of the videos from the last, like, 2 weeks was your attachment is your wound. So the attraction, the who you're attracted to has the attachment that your same wound is. So we'll get into some examples of that as well. But, all of this has to do with searching for the familiar and the discomfort of the new. Familiar does not always mean good. Familiar just means known. An insecure attachment is not random. An insecure attachment is your wound trying to find a sentence that can be completed as an expression of change or as proof. So I'm going to say that again. An insecure attachment is your wound trying to find proof. It's trying to prove something. And this is one of those masked control things. If you grew up needing to earn love as attention, and I don't mean it in that way that parents are like, you're just trying to get attention. That's one of the things that irks me, and we can do a whole class about that. But if you needed validation, if you needed support, if you needed one on one time, if you needed attention, we're talking about healthy, reasonable attention like all children need and deserve. If you grew up needing to earn love as attention, you might feel most alive when someone is slightly unavailable. But is it the kind of alive that you want to feel? Is it worth trying to complete a sentence like a prison of a past situation you had no control over, a past relationship that wasn't yours? If love felt unpredictable or volatile or challenged and earned through proof and struggle, it's like earned as struggle, like glorified struggle. If all of that was part of growing up, like you had to struggle in order to earn a break, or you had to prove something in order to get somewhere, you might feel chemistry with intensity or chaos. Likewise, if you find yourself entering a more secure relationship that isn't based on chaos, you may find yourself sparking fights and insisting and asking for proof of love because you feel uncared for, or like the relationship is uninvolved, simply because emotions are expressed as consistent, ginormous, responsible, and people pleasing moments in your past, but they're not anymore. I have been there. But that's okay, because you likely don't want to live in that constant fear of having to prove or feel responsible for someone else's emotional state. So when you are attracted to your attachment wound, that doesn't mean it's not physical. That doesn't mean you married your mother, you married your father. It doesn't mean that you can't evolve. And I am living proof that sometimes it is that way. Sometimes you're not going to be growing into the same secure place. Not both people will want to be there. Sometimes it's too triggering. Sometimes it is really unhealthy. But also, I can tell you from experience that sometimes you have opposite of attraction in the wound sense that, the person does remind you of your father, but through your own healing journey that they aren't. You know the difference. And you also get to heal because they are so opposite of what you know. So it's like they can harness that same familiar hole, that wound. Like, for example, my partner, before his own healing journey was highly dismissive, avoidant. I was highly disorganized, way fearful, anxious side, like opposites. You know what I mean? But my wound was also from a high amount of neglect, a repeating amount of neglect, and that dismissal, like that you do for me, but if I ask anything, like it's just totally ignored. But what gave me the opportunity to heal and also gave him the opportunity to heal is that we were familiar, but absolutely not the same. And so, yeah, he could be completely dismissive. He could be quiet. He could seem like he didn't care at all, except over and over and over again, I knew that he did. We showed up for each other, not as proof, as practice. And every single time that I knew as practice that we loved each other, that he was there, that it was not the same, it allowed me to unwind that hole, unwind that attachment wound, to know that it is different, that it seems like I don't matter, he's ignoring me because it's not volatile and loud, because it's not some of those other things that I was used to being. Those are the things that to me meant love. Like if dad is just watching TV and eating, he tells you about his day but doesn't care about your day. That was just the day to day, the neglect, the repetition, the like, I don't see you, I don't hear you, I don't know you, I don't really care to, right? But when I felt loved, when I was actually, I wouldn't, let's rewind that. I didn't necessarily feel loved. When I was told I was being loved, it was loud, it was critical, it was, I don't have time for this, but I'm spending time with you. I'm driving you around. I'm helping you practice this piano, or let's take it back to the math. I'm helping you with this math, right? And just this insistence of that's what love looks like. And that's kind of what we're talking about today. So we're talking about, on the surface, what you want love to be versus how you actually internally expect love to be based on what you have learned. So let's continue a little bit here. If you learn that your feelings weren't welcome, you might partner with someone who struggles to go deep, who doesn't really want to talk about feelings and, they're worn out by feelings after a few minutes. If you had to be the responsible one, you may feel drawn to someone who needs managing. You may have an expectation of love looking like enmeshment. Someone might accuse you of being codependent, and you're like, I don't really feel codependent. I feel more interdependent. And maybe you are, but you have this expectation of self-assigning emotions, like you're responsible for how they feel. So you may be operating very interdependently. You may be doing your own thing. You may be traveling, doing your own job, going to your own place, not always asking permission. And it may seem like entirely healthy, except if you're still expecting love as enmeshment, love as we are responsible for how each other feels. And on the opposite side of that, you make me feel, then it's still going to be codependent in the feelings realm, right? So you may be attracted to someone who needs that managing. You'll feel validated working for them or with them. Maybe you want to surprise them with something like, I cleaned the house for you. Or maybe you're literally working side by side. Maybe you met at work. Maybe you've started a business together. And all of this is validating that old wound, right? Helping make their dreams come true. You're completely showing up for them. But what about yours? What about your dreams, right? What about all of those things? So you'll feel used when it comes down to that kind of relationship. It'll ride out for a while and seem completely magical, but eventually you'll have that resentment of being and feeling used. And it doesn't work out because love does not equal that kind of work. But somehow in our minds from what we know, from those open wounds, from what we've learned, from the repetition that feels most comfortable, that person has learned that the work required in relationships is practically literal. And I can relate to that too. If I wanted to speak to my dad, should have been through a spreadsheet. You know what I mean? Like, we could bond over a good spreadsheet, and that was about it. If I had made a spreadsheet that was like, "These are the top 10 movies that I wanna see," then we might actually sit down and watch those movies together. And it's really innocent things like that train these things. It doesn't have to be, yelling and screaming and volatility or complete neglect. And I don't want to mother you or I don't want to father you or anything. It doesn't have to be that extreme for us to learn these things. And we don't have to learn them just from our parents. We learn them at church and communities and neighborhoods, from other caregivers, from our teachers. All of these things build expectations, anything in those realms of attachment. So there's the literal attachment, which is like 18 to 24 months. And then there's that preoperative, like learning the back and forth of attachment, which goes all the way up to 9, 10 years old. And then you're in this like rebellion phase. You're in this learning as you go into your tweens and your teens. And people are reinforcing and teaching children through all of this, right? So maybe you're thinking at this point, so what do I do about that? Like what on earth do I do? Like, how do I identify this? How do I get over it? And first we'll go with what we typically do. We typically try to fix it. And that backfires because it's a shame blame space. It's a need to. It's a I need to fix myself, and guess what? That's just masked control. That's assigning. That's what I call self-assigning emotional responsibility, which is basically just enmeshment. When you go flying into a situation trying to fix it, trying to change it, trying to control it, trying to be responsible for your emotions and someone else's, you're trying to fix the wrong thing. You're trying to fix the feeling. You're trying to fix your own discomfort with it. You're trying to fix your own discomfort with how someone else is feeling and reacting. And that's just never going to work. Other things we do is we try to grow the relationship. And that's where, maybe you're a little bit self-woke, as I've been calling it lately, instead of self-awareness. I'm like, self-wokeness. Maybe you're a little bit self-woke, you know what I mean? And your partner is not there yet. Maybe your partner doesn't want to be there. And when you try to grow the relationship, this is where you try to take responsibility for the other person's healing journey. Because and you know better, and you know what they're going through, and you know what this means, and you know what their mother, and you know their father, and all. You become their therapist instead of their partner. And that's the one thing I want you to fire yourself from right now. Like, never show up as the therapist. Take those moments as an opportunity, not for silence in a dismissal sort of way, but for security in allowing the concept of I'm okay, you're okay, we're okay. Security in the sense that everyone is allowed to be in a different place, and it doesn't mean anything. There's no I'm above you and you're behind me. There's no you're to the left or to the right. Security it's not dismissal, and there's a blog post that I wrote about this on Substack that you can go to if you're like, what's the difference between dismissing and secure? There's a whole checklist there that you can drop into, and I encourage that. But secure at the end of the day is are just solidly in your knowing. Like when you work through the BMO practice and your funk method, you're just solidly, foundationally in what you know. You know your truth, you know your value, you know who you are, you know how to meet your needs, you know you love this person and they can be on their journey and you will be there when they need, but it is their own journey. You know that you can't make anybody. You know that you can't force anything because you've been there. Yay, I love that article. I'm not either of those types, but the article really hit hard. I'm so happy to hear that. Thank you for sharing that with me, Michael. That is awesome. Yay, I'm so glad. So other things that we do is we try to communicate harder. Like we're going to talk more. We're going to talk more and more and more, you know? Oh, it's Sarah. Hi, Sarah. Apparently, I'm logged in as my brother. Brother-in-law. Well, hello, Sarah Michael Simmons. I'm so glad that you're here, and I'm glad that you liked that article. That is super meaningful. So, yeah, trying to communicate harder is essentially leaning into anxiety. It's like, I know how to use my words, so I'm going to use them to death. I'm going to use them over and over and over again until you show up in the way that is familiar. So, how many people here do this? How many people here do this and only see it in hindsight, where essentially you are so convinced that a relationship is a certain way, like you never listen to me or you never care about this or that, or you know what I mean? That you nevers. And so you talk and you talk and you talk and you talk and you talk until you force that behavior. Kind of like you always leave or something like that. It's the nevers and always, which come from preoperative behavior, which source from something before the age of 10. So it's always those behaviors in which you will just talk and keep going until the person leaves so that you can be like, see, you left. You know what I mean? Like, so the communicate harder. That's that leaning into anxiety way that we try to control things, right? Other things is we try to become better. Another way of masking self assigning emotion is that we try to control and go faster in our own healing journey. We blame ourselves, we convince ourselves it will be better when, and we try to get there as soon as possible and tell ourselves that our family, our relationship, our children, our partners, significant others will all be better if we can be better. And we're just blaming ourselves because preoperatively, before the age of 10, that is how we survived. If we can take on how dad feels and how mom feels, and we can be the kid that crawls up into their lap and does everything to make them laugh and makes them a card and shares our pretzel. And do you know what I mean? Like this, like the way that kids are and the way that you likely were, then maybe everything will be better. And I want to remind you now, if you are that person, that your ability to meet your need right now is the same as your ability to meet your need when dot 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 when I get to when this happens, right? So all of these are different examples of how we try to change, but often what we are really trying to change is an old story. And for those of you who dropped into the class that we had, the full 2-hour guided BMO journaling session this weekend, which I think was one of the best ones yet. It was amazing. If you agree, throw me a heart or say something in the comments because I know some of you are here. If you're there for that, then we talked a little bit about these old stories. We're trying to win a fight that started before the current relationship. Yay, hearts. Thank you. We're trying to finally be chosen. We're trying to finally be heard, or finally be safe, or finally be understood. We recreate until we resolve. I'm going to say that again. We recreate until we resolve over and over and over again. And here's the part that matters. This is not shame. This is pattern recognition. Your attachment style is not your identity. And so many people, they'll take a test and then they'll use it as a label rather than information. They use it as a crutch, like, oh, it's the way that I am. And how many times do we use diagnoses and labels of all kind to just lean on and be like, it is what it is? And this is where healing journeys just bust wide open when you realize that you are trying to control things and that you actually can change things. It's just opposite of what you think. You're trying to change your environment, your home, your partner, your children, your life, your clothes, your everything, your hair. But what you can change is things like your attachment style, the way that you show up, the way that you process. You can change from trying to change the emotion to showing up for the need. So, yeah, you are trying to change so many things. And then the things that you can change that make the big difference, you're like, oh, those are permanent. I want you to just flip it on its head right now. So again, your attachment style is not your identity. It is your nervous system's memory. It was how you navigated the emotional state of those around you. And at times, how you disregard your own. So your attachment is how you navigate emotions around you, which can reflect how you respond to your own emotions. But it's like I really wanna, like, put that in there because for people who are in the fearful, disorganized realm, there's the kind of illusion of I'm highly emotional and therefore I'm emotionally intelligent and therefore I have no problem feeling emotions. But the truth is, it's not about your own emotions first and foremost. Attachment is relationships. It's about what's between. It's about when someone else exhibits emotions, your reaction. And then sometimes when you exhibit emotions, you'll react in that same way. But for the most part, it's about how you're experiencing emotions around you. So if someone else is highly emotional, if someone else is going through something difficult and you're just like, I have no idea what to say or how to show up, then that's a dismissal and avoidance. And it's not that you're dismissing and avoiding that person. It's not that you don't like that person. You absolutely love that person. It's your friend, it's your partner, it's whoever you want to be there for them, but you don't have the voice. You don't have the words or the know how yet. The reason that you stand in that old truth is just the yet. You haven't learned how to yet. But what you're dismissing is their emotional state, not who they are, how they are. And that's why working through the funk method over and over, it's exposure therapy and exposure therapy first to yourself because you can control, you can change, you can be there with that. And the more that you funk, the more that you go through the BMO practice funk method, the more you're exposing yourself to emotional states, your own emotional states without fixing them. And the more that you do that over and over again, the more capable you are showing up for a variety of other people's emotional states, right? So, attachment is the blueprint that you inherited for what love feels and looks like, for that back and forth, for emotions of all kinds, for big negative ones and for the lovey dovey, cozy ones. It's what is safe, it's how you reacted. And this is where the shift happens because what you expected love to feel like may not actually be what healthy love feels like. For some of us, calm feels unsafe. Like the more quiet, the more calm, the more it's like, oh, I need to be coloring. I need to be doing something. I need to be working. You know what I mean? So for some of us, calm feels unsafe. Respect feels like mockery. Space feels like abandonment. Consistency feels boring, and ease feels unfamiliar. And drama feels like home. But on the surface, if you were to be like, oh, my dream relationship, the absolute love of my life, of course we would be calm and we would be respectful and we would be able to give each other space and we would also be able to be right on top of each other and have no space and there would be consistency and routine and it would just feel easy. That would be great. But then it's not that easy because calm is unsafe for us. And respect feels like mockery, and space feels like abandonment, and consistency feels boring and responsible, and ease is unfamiliar, but the drama feels like home. And then you go back to what we were talking about. You try to fix it. You try to grow it. You try to communicate with it. And you're just going at it with all that need to energy over and over and over again. And then you wonder, why is nothing changing? You know? And the truth is, it's right there in what you said. Like, that is a need for calm, a need for respect, a need for space, a need for consistency, a need for ease. And yet, how do you get there? You go after the stories, the history of why it's unsafe, why there's a feeling of unsafety, an experience of mockery, an experience of abandonment. why boring or calm feels unsafe, why unfamiliar is so why go there? Why brave the unfamiliar? And you want to just chip away at every single story, every single one that comes up, and you'll know you're done because a great weight will just lift. You'll get to the end of a storyline. You'll know it is the last one because all of a sudden, poof, you'll have emotional freedom. What I mean by emotional freedom is that you'll be able to feel both respect and mockery and know the need and know the choice, know yourself. That's where funk helps. You feel it. You feel both. It's not that you never feel mockery ever again. It's not that you never feel triggered ever again. It's that you feel the capacity of both, and you've brought that giant, what used to feel like a Grand Canyon of feeling two things at once. You've brought it together with practice so that you can jump that canyon. You can travel across it. You can know I'm feeling this sense of mockery. This is familiar. I know where this comes from. I know this part of my life, but I have a need for respect. And because I've been able to meet respect for myself in my life, I can recognize where respect comes from and who it comes from. And because I can recognize that and meet it for myself, I jump that tiny canyon because I've made it tiny. And I know that this triggering moment is not actually a trigger. It is the past. It is an old story. I have already survived that story. This is different. And that's your foundational knowing, right? When you arrive with knowing without having done the work, all you're doing is shaming yourself. All you're doing is need toing yourself. So you can't arrive at the K part of funk straight at the top and be like, I feel and I know, because it's not going to take you anywhere. You go through it. You go through it over and over and over again to the point that it happens naturally, just like breathing. And that is the magic of the BMO practice, is that it's memorable and it becomes a part of you and it just becomes automatic. It becomes like breathing. It's easier than meditating. It's easier than cognitive behavior therapy or dialectical behavior therapy. It encapsulates parts work and shadow work. It holds all of it, but it's easy to remember. And it's already naturally how you talk, with just the nuance of keep going. Just alter a few ways of saying things and then keep going. We talked this last weekend about FU energy and then the fun energy and just the ways that we actually really talk. And that FU energy was all about I feel and you are. And then we stop right there. But when you change it to I am feeling, I feel. I'm not that I am what I feel, but I feel. And then arriving with compassion and then continuing with those core needs and then identifying the empowering choices, then it all arrives differently. So if you are someone where respect feels like mockery or, space feels like abandonment, which I completely relate to that one, and therefore you try to control it by being the first to leave. Yeah, sound familiar to anyone? If that sounds like you, it's not because you're broken. It means your body learned something very early on and has been trying to protect you ever since. So, what do we do with this? We do three things. First, we notice the recreations. Where do you keep landing? What words keep repeating? What's underneath them? What argument feels like you have something to prove? And you aren't even sure why you're mad anymore or where it's coming from. You're just arguing at this point. What role do you keep playing? What labels are you using as crutches or leaning into? What are your beliefs about the role of love? Love as a daughter, love as a mother, love as family, love as a partner. Who do you become in conflict versus dramatic situations? Does a trip to the emergency room feel calm, like you know exactly what to do, but being asked to change something about yourself feels like a fight? Why? Why are you calm in the center of something that is heated and dramatic and heavy and intense? But then when somebody is asking you for something, anything, even with kindness, it feels defensive and like a fight. What feeling feels the most familiar? All of these things are your prompts. Any memory that comes to mind with any of this That is your next prompt. That is your next storyline. That is the next thread in your narrative. So, second, remember the root. Ask gently, when did I first feel this way? Who did this dynamic belong to before you and the relationship that you're in, before the current heat? Whose heat is it? Whose relationship is it? So who does this dynamic belong to before this partner that you're with? And before that, and before that. And keep going before that until you realize that it isn't even your relationship. It was not your relationship to begin this. It's about someone else's relationship. You are recreating a dynamic of something that you had no control over as a child. And you're recreating that relationship that was never yours to begin with because you're trying to heal something that you didn't have control over as a kid. Your parents' relationship, for example, the way that they were. So, what did you learn through that? What did you learn about what love required of you? Did it require you to always be the one to share your chocolate with a sibling or a parent? Were you always the one that had to give the hug and soothe the other person? Were you the one that had to stay quiet or go away or give space? When someone in your life needed a sense of love or told you or insisted that you were being loved or showed you this is how you love yourself, what are those stories and why? Not to blame, not to relive, but to understand. And the third thing you do with that is that you funk it. You use the BMO practice. You go through the funk method. When the pattern shows up, don't perform it, process it. Ask, how do I feel about this? Understand the source and how it has and perhaps no longer serves you. Identify the core need. Reveal empowered choices. Stand in your power. That is what funk teaches you. Teaches you to feel it, to name it, to understand it, to identify it, to choose it, and then to return to what you know over and over and over again. Because here's the truth. You do not change your attachment by choosing a different person. You change your attachment by becoming different inside your own patterns. You change it by not reenacting, by not escalating, by not shutting down, by not chasing, by not proving, but not in the need to way, not in the telling yourself, oh, I need to not escalate and I need to not shut down and I need to not need toing yourself. It's by seeing what is behind those patterns. What is the unmet need? You don't want to change how you feel because those feelings are going to come up. It's meant to help you survive. You don't want to stop surviving. You just want to stop entering survival at all the wrong places, right? So you're able to do this not by force or trying or shame or blame, but by revealing and staying with. You change it by pausing, by naming and speaking, by holding space for your need for, and choosing interaction with yourself rather than reaction. You'll know there's work to do, and the relationship with yourself is at risk when what once felt like chemistry starts to feel like chaos or quiet. You'll know you're on your way to healing when what once felt unknown starts to feel safe. When you have a willingness towards knowing. When you have a willingness towards knowing in your own life, revealing what you know, then you have the greatest power of allowing yourself to know others, which is at the core of connection. Seeing, hearing, and knowing. Core of connection. So if you feel like you're just entering this phase where you're just roommates, then it is yourself that you should know. So you make space. Every time you practice knowing yourself, you make space for knowing more about others. And how that works is because as you're knowing yourself, you have this willingness and you're learning all the different emotions, all the stories. You're making space to know other people because you're teaching yourself to be able to sit with a variety of emotions and a variety of stories that come from other people. And you know from yourself and your own work how to sit in that. And that is how that works. Safe starts to feel attractive, and safe is what sparks the conversation rather than the chaos, sparking an unmet need masked by a need to do, a need to fight, a need to prove, a need to stick with it. Those are the chaos things because they all come up because of a masked belief, a belief that all relationships are hard and what I'm doing is necessary, that it's hard. And if I continue to glorify the struggle and make it hard, then I'm doing the hard work that is required for relationships. And that's how you end up in this weird loop. And you end up spending way too much time in the wrong relationship or way too much time not growing with the relationship you choose. And it's all around the belief of relationships are hard. And so this is hard. And therefore it's hard. And I'm doing it hard. And it's all hard. It's hard. And you just, as another label that is an excuse and a crutch rather than information. So when safe feels attractive, when safety sparks the conversation, and when need is met and shared as a gift rather than an expectation, that is growth. Your growth becomes someone else's growth because it makes space. It makes space for being known. It makes space for connection because you're connecting with yourself. And connection with yourself, meeting that need for connection, creates self-recognition. And self-recognition means that you're now recognizing other people who show up for themselves. So you're building more secure relationships. You're bringing more secure people into your life. And it is all just snowballing into this greater thing. And you don't even have to worry about who's not right for your life and who is toxic because those things start to fall away. They fall away naturally and almost without effort as long as you're showing up for yourself every single day. So when you find yourself recreating the relationships that were never yours to begin with, the ones you had no control over fixing, you'll repeat bad relationships. Or you'll make badness in a relationship that isn't bad. You'll create unnecessary familiarity. You'll find the people who don't respect you, communicate with you, and aren't capable of connection because you're trying to heal those old wounds of disrespect and lack of communication and lack of connection. So when you decide to do it differently and start to work through the funk, you're not trying to fix the relationship any longer or fix yourself as the blame. You're trying to end and reenactment. You're finding the source of truth and knowing you can't change the past, but you can meet the need left unmet by an unhealed past. And we're not talking about in a whole sense. We're not talking about a whole entire unhealed past. We're talking about one single thread. This little guy just really wants to be on camera today. So we're talking about every unhealed thread, not the whole past, but a moment. You just take it one moment at a time. So when you stop reenacting, absolutely everything changes. So I'm going to post some journal prompts along with this video recording for those of you who showed up today. And this recording will be available for about 24 hours before it locks down to members only. But the journal prompts that you can go forward with this, aside from anything that came up for you today while going through this, is you can also answer, where in my current or past relationships do I notice a familiar pattern? And then you can go on to say, this dynamic reminds me of, and the first time I remember feeling this way was, and what I may have been trying to fix or win back then was, or the need for underneath this pattern is. So the need for that is underneath all of this is, if I choose to respond differently now, it might look like. And then you can continue and say, and the kind of love I am learning to build feels like. So if you didn't catch all of that, don't worry. It'll be copy and pasted into the recording, into the article. But that was our short. I always go longer. I tell people 10 minutes and it ends up being like 45. But whatever, it just happens. Thank you for joining me today. I hope that this has been helpful for you. I hope that it has sparked some things in you where you think about those repeating moments, the same fights that come up, or the frustrations or the resentments. It can be as simple as how your partner loads the dishwasher. There is nothing too big or too small to work through in the BMO practice. From Sarah and Michael. I love it. Thank you, Sarah. I want you to really challenge yourself, even if it's something small, even if it's like, I cannot stand the way that so and so loads the dishwasher. That is something. And I'm not trying to be like, there's drama in everything and there's something from the past in everything. I want you to realize that even the small everyday things, the reason you have every reason to write about that, to work through it, to go through the funk with something as simple as that, is if you want your day to day, the boring average everyday to be different, then you have to do those boring average everyday things differently. So this week, if you do one thing, I want you to use your BMO practice to move through something super mundane. Just one of those average, like, you never make the bed, you leave the toilet seat up, blah, blah, blah. Whatever that, like, repeating annoyance is, I want you to go through it. Maybe in your BMO Extras guide at the front of your journal, use the 5 whys practice. If you need help, reach out to me and I'll help you work through that. But that is an opportunity to change the day to day, not just the big dramatic things. If you're just using it on the big dramatic hard situations, the grieving situations, the will they won't they, are we going to break up? Is this over? All those types of situations, then you're actually going to be manifesting more and more of those situations when your body and your mind are trying to get you to work through it. And they know because you're training it to say, I don't work through this until. And so it's going to start making more and more of those situations so that you'll work through it. So if you want these things to quiet, if you want this repetition to calm down, I encourage you to work through the mundane, work through those things, work through the good days, recognize why it's good, recognize standing in your joy. I want you to use it in all of those situations. And you're like, what on earth am I going to say? I promise you, if you just move through the practice and you start writing, you'll know what to say. And the more you practice the average things, the more you uplift a way more than average life. I promise. And I will see you guys next week. Thank you for joining. Thank you, Sarah, for joining as Michael. It's good. We got a whole family effort going here. But it's great to see you guys, and yes. See you next week. Our next 2-hour guided session is March 15th. Tickets are available on the website, bmojournal.com/events. Our next 2-day weekend online retreat workshop is the middle of April, also available on the website and currently half off. It's got early bird specials still available. So I hope to see you guys there. And thank you. And I'll talk to you later. Bye.